Hello, everyone. My name is Reginald, and this is the RegiCast. Today, I'm going to be sharing you some of the best ways to deal with ADHD symptoms, whether you're formally diagnosed or not. I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and I pretty much had to do all my own research to find out what ADHD even means. And honestly, the thing that I wish I had the most during that time was someone to sit me down and walk me through exactly what ADHD is and what I could do about it. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give to you what I wish someone gave to me, and I hope this brings you a lot of value. Now, let me be super clear. I am not a medical professional at all, so I do not want this to replace any medical advice you've received from your doctor, your psychiatrist, or any other medical professional in your life. So without further ado, let's begin. We're going to start by defining what ADHD is, sharing what the most common symptoms are, and explaining why this matters to you, whether you've been formally diagnosed or not. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADHD for short, is actually one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders that we know about. It starts in childhood and typically continues on into adulthood. Now, if you haven't been formally diagnosed, it's important to remember that ADHD is actually a very rare diagnosis to receive these days. As of this year, global studies have estimated that about 5% of children and 6% of adults over 18 have been formally diagnosed with ADHD. And that's really good because the implications of this diagnosis are pretty intense. If you've been diagnosed with ADHD, this means that you are physically impaired in the neurological areas related to self-control and goal-oriented behavior. This is basically because norepinephrine and dopamine, chemical messengers that send signals to various areas in your brain and body, are lower in people who have ADHD than people who do not have ADHD. And what ends up happening is that various key areas of the brain, including the frontal cortex, the limbic system, the basal ganglia, and the reticular activating system, do not get the chemical signals they need to function and develop properly. So people with ADHD, if left untreated, develop the skills and functioning related to self-control and goal-oriented behavior at a rate that's about 30% slower than what you would typically expect from their chronological age. To put this in perspective, I'm going to be turning 27 pretty soon. This means that the skills that I have related to self-control and goal-oriented behavior are what you would normally expect from an 18-year-old. Everyone needs a functioning brain in order to accomplish their goals and stay disciplined. Willpower and trying harder don't come from out of nowhere. They come from your brain. And if you have a malfunctioning brain, whether it's due to a disorder or simply due to maltreatment, you're going to struggle. More specifically, you're going to struggle with these 5 skills related to self-control that are called executive functions. For starters, you're going to struggle with stopping yourself, especially while you're in the middle of doing something else, in order to take a step back and see if one of the other executive functions you have available can better guide you to the future that you want. You're going to struggle with visualizing images in your head, which is extremely important because this is the skill that allows you to remember the steps needed for any given task, to visualize future consequences before they happen, to visualize your past and learn from your mistakes, and to just generally keep track of time. You're going to struggle with using the voice in your head to help give you advice whenever you're doing something, or to stop you and ask you some really important questions before getting involved in any new situation. You're going to struggle with keeping your emotions and motivations in check so that you don't compromise on your long-term goals and well-being. This is especially true when your emotions are super intense. And finally, you're going to struggle with manipulating information in your head in order to find new ways around the obstacles that you're currently experiencing, and as a result, in order to create new plans and goals. Now, everyone is going to relate to these symptoms to some degree, whether you have ADHD or not. And that is completely okay because all of our brains are essentially structured the same way. The only difference is that people with ADHD are just going to experience these symptoms way more intensely than most other people because of the impairments that I mentioned earlier. But what's important is that no matter where these symptoms are coming from, struggling with self-control can literally ruin your life. To put this in perspective, people with ADHD are way more likely to experience things like dropping out of school, performing worse at work relative to their peers, being unemployed, getting involved in car accidents, getting involved in substance use, having an increased risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes, and unfortunately, even things as scary as increased risk of suicidal attempts and completions. This is pretty scary stuff. So, what do you do about it? After all, if the issue is with self-control, more knowledge isn't going to help you. I could tell you as much as I want, but if you're not actually going to act on what you know, then this information is completely useless to you, right? Especially with a disorder that makes it hard for you to act to begin with, right? Well, you may not like the answer to this, but this is something you need to hear. If you're struggling with ADHD or even symptoms related to impaired self-control and goal-oriented behavior, what you need is to restructure your environment so that it tracks, rewards, and punishes your actions as quickly as possible. I'm actually going to read this quote for you. The solution to anybody's problem with an executive deficit is to tighten up accountability, to make you more accountable more often to other people with more consequences, artificial as they may be. You need to bring the consequences of your actions closer to you in time. This intense accountability starts with how you view self-control to begin with. You have to assume that the small amount of mental energy that you have for self-control gets quickly used up whenever you use at least one of those executive functions that I mentioned earlier. And what's worse is that if you don't refuel that mental energy in time, you will have absolutely no control in the next situation you find yourself in. And that is not a good place to be. I've been there. The two most powerful ways are physical exercise and sleep. Now, I know you were looking for something way more exciting than that, but this is the best place to start. Physical exercise, in fact, has been shown to have a greater benefit for people with ADHD than for any other psychiatric disorder that we know of as of this moment, at least. Physical exercise has been shown to have a greater benefit to people with ADHD than for any other psychiatric disorder that we know about. And that's because it improves not only the mental energy that you have for the moment, it actually increases the overall mental energy you'll be able to expend in the future. Meaning that over time, you'll actually increase the ability to focus and control yourself just by getting a workout in. As for sleep, it's been shown that the moment you stay up past 16 hours, you start experiencing mental and physical impairments similar to the symptoms of ADHD that I shared before. And once you start staying up past 19 to 20 hours, your impairments get so intense that you have the same type of brain impairment as someone who has been drunk and driving on the freeway. It's extremely important to find a way to get 8 hours of sleep every single night. Other than these two approaches, there are many other ways to refuel your mental energy. Things like giving yourself positive pep talks, meditation, relaxation, working for only 10 minutes and then taking 3-minute breaks to refuel yourself. Taking 10-minute breaks between tasks in order to completely recover. And this one's actually my favorite, finding some somewhat sugary but healthy drink to sip on while you're doing something for a long period of time. So for me, I like juice, So I sip on that to keep my blood glucose high and get that stimulation to my brain so that it stays fueled. As long as you're protecting your mental energy, you don't have to worry anymore about losing control over yourself in any situation that you find yourself in, whether it's social, professional, or just personal. After you've started to protect your mental energy, the next thing you have to admit to yourself is that even with that small amount of self-control, you're not going to complete the 50 things that you want to get done in your head, even if you've convinced yourself that you will. And while you're at it, you might as well admit to yourself that you can't keep track of time to save your life, right? So you need to use your physical environment to keep the most important things right in front of your face. So you need the environment to keep the most important tasks and deadlines right in front of your face, whether that's through a Google Calendar that you keep open with alarms or with a physical calendar that you put in front of you, whether that's through a productivity app that you have on your phone at all times, or with a regular to-do list with pen and paper that you keep in front of you at all times. Again, you have to assume that your self-control is very small. Out of sight, out of mind is unfortunately a reality that you will need to accept for yourself, and you might as well just start using your environment to remind you of things in a way that you like. Out of sight, out of mind is unfortunately the new reality that you have to accept about yourself, so you need to physically keep things in front of you in order to remember to get them done at all. Last but definitely not least, you need to act as if all of those future dreams and goals that you've been telling yourself you're going to do, you're never going to sit down and do them. You're not. Anything that is not right in front of your face is not getting done. So what you really need to do is you need to break down those future dreams and goals into tiny goals that are due today. Put them physically in front of you and then just chip away at it until it's done, and repeat that process every day for the rest of your life. Because the reality is that you're not going to sit down one day and work on something that's due 6 months from now. Well, unless, of course, you find out that it's due tomorrow and you forgot, right? But if you work on something small every day, eventually you'll actually get to the future that you want, all without thinking about it, honestly. That is about it. Those are the best ways to deal with the ADHD symptoms that you're experiencing and to really take control of your life again. Now, if you implement these strategies and are still struggling, I would highly encourage you to reach out to a medical professional such as a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist to see if you need to be evaluated for things like ADHD or any other psychiatric disorder. From there, they will work with you to develop a treatment plan that you need, which may include medication and may include things like therapy. I personally do both and am benefiting from both, thankfully, and I definitely encourage you to at least look into it. But in the meantime, I would love to hear how you're doing with these strategies, as well as if you have any other strategies that have been helping you with things like ADHD symptoms or anything along those lines, right? So definitely leave a comment. I would love to read how you're doing with it, as well as if you have any feedback related to this video, I'd love to hear that as well. So looking forward to your comments. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.